think we should get divorced," my husband Mark announced casually over breakfast, like he was discussing the weather. "Jennifer from accounting and I have fallen in love." I carefully set down my coffee mug, studying his face across our granite countertop. After 15 years of marriage, my 42-year-old husband was leaving me for his 26-year-old coworker. The worst part? I'd hired Jennifer myself when I was CFO at my old firm 2 years ago. "How long?" I asked, maintaining eye contact while reaching for my phone under the table. Mark didn't notice. He never noticed anything beyond his own reflection these days. "Does it matter, Sarah?" He smiled that arrogant smile I'd once found charming. "We're moving in together next week. I've already spoken to my lawyer. I'm Sarah Chin-Williams, and at 40, I was watching my carefully built life crumble over cold toast and eggs. But while Mark probably expected tears or begging, I was secretly recording our conversation. The signs had been there for months. The late-night emergency meetings, the new designer suits, the sudden passion for CrossFit. I'd seen it all before, just from the other side of the conference table. During my decade as CFO at one of Boston's top investment firms, I'd handled enough corporate divorces to recognize the pattern. Last year, when their biggest competitor approached me with their CEO position, I initially hesitated. Leaving meant abandoning the company I'd helped build. But something in my gut told me change was coming, both professionally and personally. I accepted the role and quietly transitioned out 6 months ago. Mark, absorbed in his own world, barely noticed my career move. He just knew I was still doing something in finance. What Mark also didn't know was that I'd started gathering evidence 3 months ago when I first spotted Jennifer's lipstick on his collar. The same strategic thinking that helped me turn around a struggling Fortune 500 company was about to prove very useful in my personal life. The moment Mark left for work, I pulled out my laptop and activated the plan I'd been preparing for months. First call, my lawyer Richard, who'd been on standby since I first suspected Mark's infidelity. "It's happening," I said when he answered. "He's leaving me for Jennifer." "Did you record the conversation?" Richard asked, straight to business. "Of course. Sending it now, along with the files." Those files contained everything. Bank statements showing suspicious withdrawals, credit card bills from hotels, screenshots of their not-so-discreet text messages, and surveillance photos from the private investigator I'd hired. "You've done well, Sarah," Richard said after a moment. "Most clients come to me with nothing but tears. You're bringing me a war chest." I smiled, though there was no joy in it. 15 years in corporate finance teaches you to keep receipts. While Richard began the legal proceedings, I made my second call to my new company's board chairman. "Remember that acquisition target we discussed? I think it's time to move forward." "The timing's perfect," he replied. Their stock just dropped after those rumors about internal problems. Those rumors about financial mismanagement at my old firm had started circulating shortly after my departure. Funny how things work out. I spent the rest of the morning transferring funds from our joint accounts into my private ones, accounts I'd opened months ago. Unlike Mark, I'd actually read our prenups fine print. Any funds I'd earned during my CFO and CEO positions were mine alone. By noon, I'd moved into the Four Seasons Hotel downtown. My assistant had already arranged for a moving company to pack my personal belongings while Mark was at work. I left his favorite watch, my anniversary gift to him, on his pillow. Attached was a note, "Time's up." 3 days of silence followed. I knew it was driving Mark crazy. His 20 missed calls and increasingly angry texts proved that. He'd expected me to beg him to stay, or at least fight back. Instead, he got radio silence while I let my lawyers do the talking. Then the first bomb dropped. My old firm announced a surprise audit of their accounting department. Jennifer, as a junior accountant, was immediately put on administrative leave. Mark's frantic voicemail came within hours. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I know you're behind this somehow. Call me back." I didn't. Instead, I focused on work, leading my company's aggressive expansion plans. It's amazing how therapeutic hostile takeovers can be during personal crises. A week later, Mark finally received my divorce terms through Richard. His response was predictable. $3 million? He burst into my office unannounced, waving the papers. You've lost your mind. I looked up calmly from my desk, noting how my security team was already moving toward my door. That's actually quite reasonable, considering the circumstances. Reasonable? It's highway robbery. His face was turning that interesting shade of red I remembered from our marriage's worst fights. Think of it as severance pay, I said, standing to face him. Though it's much more generous than what Jennifer just got from her former employer. His face paled. What? Oh, you hadn't heard? The audit revealed some irregularities in accounts she managed. Nothing criminal, probably just incompetence. But in financial services, perception is everything. You vindictive bide. Security will show you out now, I interrupted, nodding to the two men who'd entered. And Mark? Next time, make an appointment. I'm a very busy woman these days. As Mark was escorted out, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the office windows, calm, composed, in my tailored suit and Louboutins. A far cry from the woman who used to dim her light to make her husband comfortable. The next few weeks unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. News of my former firm's internal issues hit the financial press. Their stock price started sliding. Mark, as one of their senior partners, watched his equity shares lose value daily. Meanwhile, my company's aggressive growth strategy was making headlines in the Wall Street Journal. Jennifer was the first to crack. She showed up at my hotel one evening, mascara streaking down her face. I can't find another job, she sobbed. Every firm in Boston seems to know about the audit. The financial world is surprisingly small, I replied, not inviting her in. Perhaps Mark can help. He's always been so, supportive of young talent. He broke up with me yesterday, she whispered. Said he couldn't risk his career being linked to mine. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Life lessons rarely come cheap, Jennifer. But they're always worth the price. After she left, I received a text from Mark. You've made your point. Let's talk. We met at our old favorite restaurant, though this time I arrived with my lawyer. Mark looked tired, defeated. His designer suit seemed to hang loosely on his frame. What do you want, Sarah? He asked, his previous arrogance nowhere to be seen. I already gave you my terms, I replied, sipping my wine. They haven't changed, though your ability to meet them might have, given recent market developments. Your terms, Mark laughed bitterly. $2 million for your silence about my affair. $1 million for my shares in our property. Plus my stake in the vacation home. Consider it the price of a clean exit, I said. Unless you'd prefer the board to review those creative accounting practices you've been using to inflate your client portfolio numbers? His head snapped up. You wouldn't. The same way you wouldn't leave your wife for a woman half your age? I raised an eyebrow. People surprise you sometimes. 3 hours later, Mark signed the papers. His hands shook slightly, but he signed. The next morning, my company announced its acquisition of my former firm at a bargain price. The board members who'd once overlooked my contributions in favor of Mark's showmanship were now answering to me as CEO. Funny how life works out sometimes. I kept our old house but sold it immediately. Instead, I bought a sleek penthouse downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows. From up here, the city lights remind me of stars, and I can see all the way to the financial district where I first started my career 20 years ago. Last week, I received a wedding invitation. Jennifer is marrying some junior analyst from a small firm in Providence. Mark, I heard, took a position at a regional bank in Ohio, quite a step down from his former managing director role. As for me, I just closed another major acquisition. My company's stock hit an all-time high, and the Wall Street Journal ran a profile calling me the Ice Queen of Wall Street. I rather like the title. The article sits framed on my office wall, next to a small sign that reads, "Success is the best revenge."